this section with an important topic, and that's Architecture Development Method or ADM. You will see the diagram or a figure of ADM or Architecture Development Method on your screen. This is one of the most important figure in TOGAF, and as mentioned earlier, ADM is the core topic of TOGAF. So I suggest you take a printout and just paste it near to your work or study table and try to follow and memorize the different steps and phases of ADM. To pass the exam, it's very important that you know the different phases by heart. Let's try to understand ADM with help of the diagram. The ADM provides a tested and repeatable process for developing architecture. ADM method defines 8 sequential phases from A to H and 2 other special phases, the preliminary phase and the requirement management phase. So as you see, it's a step-by-step phase approach to get desired architecture implementation in an organization. It's an iterative process. Once you start from preliminary phase and start with phase A, architecture vision, it just goes on and on in a circle. In our discussion, we'll be focusing on two types of architecture, baseline and target architecture. As name suggests, baseline is as-is architecture or current architecture state, and target is where your architecture that organizations seek to attain. You as an architect start with baseline architecture. You fill the gap with the help of ADM method so that your organization is able to achieve the desired target state. As seen in basic concept section, core concept section is also about definition. So let's look at some of the definition. We have seen in previous slide that ADM is an iterative process that is undertaken by organization to achieve the target architecture. During this ADM process, number of outputs are produced, like for example, process flows, architecture requirement documents, project plans, project compliance assessment, and so on. Now these documents need to be organized properly. As per TOGAF, these are organized under TOGAF Architecture Content Framework, and these outputs are categorized into as deliverables, artifacts, and building blocks. Let's look at these categories in detail. Deliverables. As you go through ADM and start creating outputs and documents, these becomes deliverables. Deliverables are contractually specified, reviewed, agreed to, and signed off by stakeholders. Deliverable represents the output of a project, and those deliverables that are in documentation form will typically be archived at a completion of the project. Next is artifact. Artifact is an architecture work product that describes an aspect of architecture. Typical example is catalog like list of things, requirement catalog, matrices diagram, use case diagram, business diagrams, and so on. An architectural deliverable may contain many artifacts. An artifact is a work product diagram which goes into deliverable. Next is building block. Building block is potentially reusable component of business, IT, or architecture capability that can be combined with other building block to deliver architecture and solution. This building block has two flavors. One is ABB, called as Architecture Building Block, which specifies the requirement, and the other is SBB, Solution Building Block, which specifies the implementation details. We will be looking into details of the building block later, but at this stage, just be aware that there are two flavors of building block, Architecture Building Block and Solution Building Block. Architecture Building Block is requirement, Solution Building Block is the solution, the implementation. So let's now look at one more important TOGAF concept other than ADM, and that is Enterprise Continuum. So what is Enterprise Continuum? But before we get into details of Enterprise Continuum, let's look into the meaning of continuum. Continuum means continuous sequence of line with a quite distinct extremes. So let's draw a line, a sequence of adjacent elements as shown on the screen. The left side of the line is the generic architecture and the right side is the specific architecture. Now, if you map your company's architecture along this line, your specific company's architecture will be towards right of the line and any generic architecture will be mapped towards left. So with enterprise continuum, any generic solution or architecture can be bought into your organization to create your architecture. So enterprise continuum is nothing but a view of architecture repository which shows evolution of related architecture from generic to specific, from abstract to concrete, or from logical to physical. We will be looking into detail of enterprise continuum in detail in future chapter. There's a whole one section dedicated for enterprise continuum. Next is architecture repository. Supporting the enterprise continuum is the concept of architecture repository, which can be used to store different classes of architectural output at different level of abstraction. So during architecture development method, as different architectural output like deliverable, artifacts, technical and business documents at different level of abstractions are created, it need to be stored. These get stored in architectural repository. You can think architectural repository as a big cabinet or a file with different partition, and the architectural outputs are stored in it as and when you go through an ADM process. Let's see some of the components of architectural repository. So you have architectural meta model, which describes the organizationally tailored application of an architecture framework. That is, it describes the meta model of architecture content or the template for which you do architecture. Then you have architecture capability, which defines the parameters, structure, and process that support governance of the architecture repository. Architecture landscape, which shows the architecture view, solutions, applications that are in organization today. So essentially a list of live application. It also holds the baseline and target architecture details and its relevant document. And this is the biggest part of architecture component. Standard information base. These include industry standard, external standard, selected products and services from vendor. Reference library provides guidelines, templates, patterns, and other forms of reference material that can be leveraged in order to accelerate the creation of new architecture for the enterprise. These are external reference model. Like if your organization is a financial institution, then you look for a related proven financial industry domain specific architecture. Then these architecture goes into the reference library. And lastly, governance log, which records governance activity across enterprise, like which software architecture design to be approved, which architecture design not to be approved, and so on. All this information which drives architecture decision of an organization goes inside the governance log. That covers the core concept section. I encourage you to read the chapter 2 from the TOGAF document link as mentioned in the slide. Any questions? Again, please drop me a message, or if you think it will help wider audience, please post it in the discussion forum, and God bless.